Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. This is an open Big Book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the fifth session of the fifth cycle of the workshop that was presented on March 2nd, 2024, where we completed the fears inventory portion of step 4. Next week, we'll begin the harms inventory. If you would like to contribute to the seventh tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. We're getting started in the big book, but where we're starting, and the best place to start in understanding getting sober and coming into AA is the big book. And the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is actually the set of instructions on how to get rid of the things that are blocking us off from our higher power, how to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from our lives being unmanageable. And we need to know that merely reading the big book without experiencing it is not going to, does not mean we're working the steps. We're just reading the book. We're reading the instructions. You can't learn how to do something by just reading the instructions. You actually have to do it. So you can't learn how to swim without jumping in the water. You can study it all you want, but until you actually jump in the water, you're not going to learn how to swim. And that's why what we have to do is we have to practice, and and I love it. It says we practice these principles in all our affairs. We practice, practice, practice. The cover page of the big book states that this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Now, when we define recovered, that means that the problem has been removed. That's the definition. I don't have to make a choice as to whether or not I drink because I don't even think about drinking it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol when I'm upset. Alcohol is no longer an option to solve my problems. Selfishness and self-centeredness rather are gone, and I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful. My old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new peaceful ones. And then when we go on to the 10th step promise, there's lots of other promises we talk about, but this is the 10th step promise, which I love because this was me. I was at war with the world. But the 10th step promise, which is on page 84, states that we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it. We're not avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We don't even have to swear off. I should quote it. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience as long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And then page 27 defines recovered as ideas, emotions, attitudes, which were once the guiding forces in the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And then when we go to the appendix of the spiritual experience, it defines recovered as a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And then the forward to the first edition states, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. I used to engage in the recovered argument, and for the longest time, I didn't understand what it meant until I really read the book and saw what it meant. Therefore, I use the term recovered because that's what it says in the book. The book later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement for becoming recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything that the big book says to do. So we are already into this. So I'm going to give a very high level overview of what we've covered, and then we're going to jump into it a little bit more. So we started the working of the steps in step one. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The admission of powerlessness, having that self-awareness, that I am an alcoholic. I cannot drink. I'm a real alcoholic. However, as a real alcoholic, the only thing self-knowledge does is it makes me realize that I cannot take just one drink without being physically driven to take one drink after the other. This then allows me the opportunity, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on the first drink. That is the insanity that we talk about in the second step of being restored to sanity. I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but that is the insanity. The insanity of being an alcoholic is not the stupid stuff that we do when we're drinking. That's a result of it being intoxicated, that even non-alcoholics, when they get drunk, they do stupid things. The insanity of our disease is that when we pick up that first drink, we're sober. So therefore, I know that I'm going to be physically driven to take one drink after another, because once I pick up, it triggers the compulsion. But this again gives, when I have this knowledge, it gives me the opportunity, if I'm spiritually fit, to pass on that first drink. And I can only do this on a continuous basis if I'm connected to my higher power, which brings me to step 2 of what I was talking about in that insanity, in that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So we have gone through the process. We've identified what our higher power is, and we're believing and trusting that that power is going to restore us to sanity. And the sanity is we live a sober life. The insanity is when we pick up that first drink, we're sober. We don't have any alcohol in our body, but we're giving into a mental obsession. And then once we put the alcohol in our body, it triggers the physical compulsion to that, where we cannot stop. So step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The sanity is that we do not put alcohol in our bodies. Then in the 3rd step, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. It's just a decision. Then once we make that decision, and this is the 3rd step prayer that we use in helping us to make that decision, we're at the 4th step, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And the 4th step inventory actually consists of 4 different inventories. You've got one for resentments, one for fears, and 2 for harms. So first we did our resentment inventory, where we listed the people, the institutions, and the principals with whom we were angry. And we have the list straight from the big book: Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, my wife. And then we asked ourselves why we were angry. And what it says is that in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relationships that had been interfered with? And this has to do, again, with those parts of self. Your self-esteem is how you feel about yourself, your pride. Your pocketbook is your money, your finances, or anything of a material nature. Your emotional security is how safe you feel in the world. Your ambitions are your plans for the future, which are both immediate and down the road. Your personal relationships are how you interact with others, and your sex relationships. And then we start to look at, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Even though a situation may not have been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them in black, and we placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. And this is straight from page 67. So this boils down to 5 main character defects, in that I'm selfish. I want to keep what I have, and I want things done my way. I'm dishonest. I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief. I'm self-seeking. I want more than I have right now. I'm frightened, and I'm inconsiderate. And then we went on to break it down into even more character defects. And this is just a list of some that we can use as a tool. So when we looked at the resentment inventory, we took all of the names on that list and we transferred it to the resentment inventory form. So here you see we had Mr. Brown, then resentful at Brown because he was paying attention to my wife. I wasn't able to put all those parts of self affected in there, but the actual form has a grid that lists all of them. And then columns 4 and 5 are, what did I do? What was my part? How did I get the ball rolling? And then we checked off the character defects that allowed us to do it, where I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and then other. That list of other character defects was there. And I'm not going to go over every one. I'm going to just show you, because we went over all this last time. But here it is with Mrs. Jones. Here it is with my employer. And you can see how we had a list of other character defects over here. And then, of course, the wife. We had a lot. We had them all checked off here, and a lot more under other. Now, you don't necessarily have to go into the detail that I did, but I did that for the sake of demonstration. So when we talk about this, we look at we're only looking at what we did. And where were we selfish? Where did I want to keep what I have and have things done my way, etc. And again, you want to look at all of these. And I just to talk briefly, using these specific character defects is important because the big book lists mean, egotistical, indignant, self-pitying, self-centered, and self-delusional. Step 6 and 7's instructions includes ready to let God remove from us all of the things which we had admitted are objectionable. And all means all, everything. And then it says, every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So while every character defect falls within those 5 major areas or a combination of them, this helps us to be more specific when we get deeper into the steps, especially in 6 and 7, and then 9 and 10 as well. So, for example, if you look at this, people pleasing is really being dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened all at the same time. But people pleasing gives a more accurate description of what I'm actually doing, because when I'm a people pleaser, I'm not being honest with you because I'm going to say what I think you want me to hear. I'm going to keep my opinion to myself. I'm going to keep my feelings to myself. But I'm going to be self-seeking in that I'm going to try to manipulate you to do things my way. And I'm frightened that if you find out what I really think, you're not going to like me. Therefore, that people pleasing that's how it can manifest itself in some of our lives. So what we're looking at is, in reality, the same situations will repeat themselves because our character defects continue to play out in the same way, time after time. Why does this always happen to me? The circumstance is always the same. It's just the faces change of the people that are doing it. So, for example, again, if you're a people pleaser, you're going to continually be in situations where you agree to do things that you don't want to do. You give people things that you really don't want to give, and you don't stand up for yourself because you want people to like you. And what happens is that you continue to be unhappy and wonder, why me, God? Why does this always happen to me? I was the queen of why me? Because what we repeat, what we don't repair. That's why we need to have God remove these defects of character. So it's not the person that's listed in column 1 of the inventory that's causing your unhappiness, but the character defects that come into play. And then last week, we started with the fear inventory. We're born with 2 fears, fear of loud noises and fear of falling. And all other fears are based on either we're afraid we're not going to get something we think we deserve, or we're afraid we're going to lose something that we already have. And last week, we looked at the video by Brene Brown, where she talked about the power of vulnerability, how our fears can make us feel very vulnerable. So when we go now to the big book on page 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. That's column 1. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Column 2, perhaps there's a better way. Column 4, and this is an example of a fear inventory. And this was one that I did several years back. But the thing about this particular inventory is the first thing we look at is what I'm afraid of. And I'm afraid of it because column 3 is a very powerful piece. Do I realize that I rely on myself rather than my higher power? And all we do is check off yes or no. Column 4 talks about the things that I can do. What footwork can I do to make sure that this does not happen? And what character defects would keep me from doing what I need to do in column 4? Am I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, or others? So let's go back here. All right. So in looking at this, what I'm saying here is I'm afraid I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills and I'll lose my house. So that's what I'm afraid of. Financially. And I'm afraid of this because, well, number one, I wouldn't have any place to live, but it would also affect my reputation and my needs will be met. Yeah, Mary Ann, she lost her house, she lost her job, she lost her house. What a loser. She's not doing a good job. So now I ask myself, do I rely on myself rather than my higher power? Yeah, I'm relying on me. So now in 4 and 5, I'm looking at okay, what can I do? Well, I can find better sources of income. I can increase my cash flow. I can find another part-time job to supplement my income. I can develop and live on a strict budget. I can move to a cheaper place, which is what I wound up doing eventually. But when I did this, that's what it was. That's where it was. But my character defects that stopped me from doing it was I was frightened. I was an approval seeker. I was a people pleaser, a perfectionist, and I was selfish, and I was a procrastinator because I was putting it off. So what we want to do here is remember that the fear inventory is to see if there's footwork that we're capable of doing and to start doing these actions immediately so that we can stop being paralyzed by fear, controlled by people, places, and things. And remember that God will only do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Therefore, column 4 lists the things that we're capable of doing. So to come back to this, what we're looking at is first we want to write down a fear that we have in column 1. In column 2, we're looking at why we have this fear. So why do you have that particular fear? Or what's so scary about what's in column 1? Or what's the worst thing that would happen if my fear came true? Then next, we look at column 3, where we just click yes or no. Am I trusting myself or am I trusting God? And then when we get to column 4, we list what measures we can take to prevent this fear from happening. And you want to list as many things as you can think of. And then column 5 is where we list those character defects. So what we're going to do, let me stop for a second. Stop the video, please. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's Prayer for Mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.